Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 news. Incredible statements coming out to Lewis Hamilton following the Montreal Grand Prix. For a couple of weeks now, Hamilton has fueled suggestions of potential sabotage at Mercedes that is leading to Russell's very impressive qualifying performances so far this season over Lewis Hamilton. Lewis has now gone into detail on exactly what he thinks Mercedes might be doing, implying that Mercedes are putting the tyre blankets during the qualifying sessions 2 or 3 degrees lower than they are for George Russell. This is giving him a disadvantage in qualifying for reasons somewhat unknown. What will Mercedes have to say about this? Is Lewis correct on his assessment here? Why would this even be going on? Very much interested your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. So much, however, to discuss today. Sergio Perez, after the Montreal Grand Prix, of course he scored 0 points after a DNF, a stinking weekend really. He was never in the top 10 once. Broke his rear wing, kind of like Sebastian Vettel did many a year ago. I think even Lando Norris mentioned that in the debrief room. This was the state of his car though, and well, you might expect the car's ruins, just leave it there, but obviously if you do leave it where it crashed, it's going to cause a safety car. This put the cars at risk, this put debris over the circuit, but regardless, Perez decided to drive back to the pits with this absolutely mangled rear wing. As a result of this, Perez receives, to make his weekend even worse, a 3-place grid drop for the next race in Spain for driving back to the pits with so much damage to the rear wing. This, however, is the fascinating part. Red Bull admitted it was trying to avoid a safety car, because at this point Max was leading. They obviously wanted to avoid a safety car if possible, so Red Bull say that they deliberately told Perez to effectively break the rules in order to come back to the pits, and they got fined for it. So this is when Will Buxton chimes in. I thought his assessment was quite interesting. I'm not sure I fully agree with it, but I think it's certainly interesting that the team has effectively admitted to breaking the rules because they knew the car wasn't in a safe condition to come back to the pits, but they told Perez, look, drive back anyway, we want to avoid a safety car here. Now, as a result, as Buxton says, that would endanger other drivers. This is why the rule exists, strew debris over the track. So his assessment then goes on to say, if you reverse the outcome of the reasoning, they've told him not to follow the rules to not bring out a safety car. He says, is that any different to telling a driver to breaking the rules to bring out a safety car? He says that, you know, the difference is either a grid drop and a fine, which Perez got, or Singapore 2008, when of course the Nelson Piquet Jr. Renault crash that gave eventually Fernando Alonso the win. So, you know, is it fair to equate driving back to the pits in that occasion and literal rigging of the race back in 2008? I'm not sure they're quite the same in my eyes, but I see what he's saying, right? That this is effectively attempted race manipulation, is it not? If they knowingly broke the rules to try not to give a safety car, I don't know, it's interesting, and it might be something that is worth consideration in the future, because I think I would agree that while disqualification from the championship is probably not the right cause in this instance, a more severe penalty for the team is probably fine. I mean, a €25,000 penalty for attempted race manipulation, I guess is one way of looking at it, seems a bit, lenient as far as I'm concerned. But Perez is the one. It's funny, isn't it? Like, Red Bull told Perez, on your bike, mate, you're coming back to the pit so we can make sure Verstappen wins this race. And then it's Perez that gets the 3-place drop for next race. And, you know, so maybe it's going to be P20 next race rather than P18, but we shall see where he ends up. Obviously, there was talk from Christian Horner as well on the state of Sergio Perez this weekend. We'll get to that in a second. Quickly, though, on Carlos Sainz, because a stinking weekend, of course, for Ferrari. We discussed it in some detail yesterday. 0 points for Sainz after really, he had no pace. Then he crashed out of the race and took Albon along with him. The funny thing is that he says sorry to the team and to Albon, and as Ralf Schumacher said at the time, Carlos just took out his future teammate. So the feeling is this will be a teammate pairing next year at Williams. And would Sainz have apologised directly to Albon? Maybe he would have done, but it certainly makes it more likely that he would apologise to what may be his future teammate and team, because, you know, Albon and Williams were in a good place here yesterday, and then Sainz takes him out of the race, and I can understand why Williams, I think, damn, we're going to sign this guy, and he's just scuppered our chances of scoring points that Grand Prix. Pretty tough scenes, and And, the belief is even as of today that this deal between Sainz and Williams is very close. It may already be done, we don't know. There have been some rumours that this has already been a done deal, but I guess I would say, are they just going to wait until Spain to announce it, even if it is? And the feeling is that there is a common desire to work together, and that will eventually happen. Leclerc on the other side of the Ferrari garage also had a real shocker. Apparently he was down 80 horsepower with this engine malfunction, so that was costing him between half and then up to a second a lap, just on the straight and pure pace. So yeah, he just had no speed, unfortunately, and when he did have the speeds, they put him on the hard tyres and his race was quickly over. Just wanted to address quickly the drama at Alpine, because you can't go a single day at this moment without some drama within that team. Effectively, towards the end of the Grand Prix, there was some drama when Ocon post-race said, no comment, I'm too nice, I've done what I had to do, which is the most important, but you guys didn't do what you had to do, that's it. So this effectively what happened is, Ocon was given team orders to let Gasly pass to try and I think catch Daniel Ricciardo possibly, but he was like, we're never going to do that anyway, so what's the point in doing this swap? Ocon then said, okay, well Gasly couldn't get anything done further up, so how about you let me have the place back? And they said, no, stay behind Gasly, you're holding position, and Ocon obviously wasn't very happy about it. Now, I don't blame him, I wouldn't be happy as well, but also you've got to understand you've been dropped from the team, so, you can kind of expect this type of stuff to occur. And look, if Alpine want to continue to pretend that the events of Monaco had nothing to do with Ocon being dropped, I don't know what they're thinking, because clearly they're trying to punish this guy on and off the track. And, well, what I'm hoping for, from a pure entertainment perspective, is that Ocon decides, you know what, screw these guys. I'm going to go absolutely, Rambo mode the next couple of races and pedal to the metal, balls to the wall, absolutely no punches withheld. And Ocon already drives like that, to be fair, but maybe even more so from now to the end of the season. Quickly on Horner, because James Allison said during the weekends that it seems like Red Bull's upgrades they brought in Imola were actually downgrades instead of upgrades. And Horner kind of hit back at Allison and said, yeah, well, even with our downgrade, as you call it, we still managed to beat their upgrades. So a rewarding race to win. But it doesn't take away the point that James Allison was confident enough to say, yeah, looks like Red Bull have kind of lost their form, which shows in the same sentence, it kind of implies that Allison believes Mercedes really have a grip on what's going on with their car now, and they've got more upgrades to bring. Definitely feels like Mercedes, yes, it was one weekend and it was one competitive weekend. They scored pole, they scored a podium. I mean, it could have been a double podium if things had gone different further up the field, or if Hamilton's qualifying was better. We'll get into that one most certainly here in a second. Perez, of course, stinker. He has to improve, and it's tough because Horner got this deal done, right? He got the extension done for Perez. If Marco was the one making the decisions, I don't think this deal happens, but Horner felt like it was the right thing to do. Maybe from a business POV, that can certainly be argued. Maybe from a satisfying Verstappen POV, I don't know. But look, Max is obviously happy beating up on his teammate every week, but is he happy that he has like no support in the championships, that he's gonna have to win both championships again on his own? Like, I don't know how happy he really is with that whole state of affairs, to be honest. Maybe he doesn't care, but he's fighting 1v2 most Grand Prix against another team that's second, third, or third, fourth, or whatever the case is. That was of course the case this time for McLaren. But let's talk about the situation at Mercedes, because it's been a remarkable few weeks for them, and really a season so far. Ever since before the season began, Hamilton was leaving, he was going to join Ferrari. There were questions, what would that look like on track this season? Would Hamilton go out with a bang? Would Russell really take over? I think my feeling was that certainly Russell would be started to give the precedence over Hamilton in terms of upgrades that have arrived, which I think we've seen so far this season, in terms of strategic calls possibly, in terms of getting invited to the meetings. But I guess one of the questions is Hamilton not the driver that he was 12 months ago? Because, ever since 2021, people are saying, oh, Hamilton's past it and all this, and maybe there's some arguments you can make on that one, certainly in qualifying pace, or that Hamilton might be inclined to disagree. But you've also got to remember it wasn't many months ago where Hamilton was fighting for second in the constructors or in the drivers behind, with the RB19 and was ahead of the rest of the field. So I don't think Hamilton's washed up or anything, but the reality is that he's 8-1 down this season to George Russell. The last couple of years in qualifying performance, they've been very neck and neck. We know Russell missed a Saturday, right? Incredible qualifier. Hamilton might not be quite the qualifier that he previously was, but over the last two seasons, the W13, the W14, they were basically neck and neck in qualifying over those 2 years. But in race pace, Hamilton had, and probably remains, having the upper hand in these moments, which makes a fair bit of sense given his experience. And, I really rate Russell. I think he's really good, and I think he gets, underrepresented by many in the community, but it's still surprising to see that Russell's 8-1 over Hamilton in qualifying this season, especially when there's more upgrades to come. So Mercedes, and Hamilton will be happy that, you know, there will be more opportunities for podiums and for Grand Prix wins. Russell, of course, said, like, ugly race on my behalf. The reality is when you're on pole and you don't win, it's always a bit of a dagger. Toto Wolff after the race said, well, not really sure we had the pace to win anyway, so it is what it is. But Hamilton after the race said, yeah, I probably could have won today had I qualified better. And even Hamilton made some interesting assessments saying that that was one of the worst races that he's ever driven. Now, it didn't really feel that way, but, you know, he did say, well, you know, qualified poorly, got stuck behind Alonso for a long time. If it wasn't for the safety car, Hamilton wouldn't really have been in the fight further up the field. And then at the end of the Grand Prix, I guess he had the chance to hold off Russell again, but the reality is that Russell was just on the faster tyres because Mercedes put Hamilton on the hards, which was a very interesting decision and in some ways maybe suspicious decision that we'll go on to in a second. I think also part of what Hamilton is saying here is like I went from 7th to 4th with one of my worst ever drives. George went 1st to 3rd with one, you know, with his drive. So there's friction at Mercedes. There's absolutely no denying it. Not just between those two drivers, but between Hamilton and the team as well. So over the last couple of weekends, we've started to see some interesting statements here from Hamilton on what he feels is going on. Now, whether you feel this is all, you know, just complete BS, Hamilton's making it up, he's seeing ghosts as it were, but I think there's more to it than that. Just seeing the other things, like it's not just the qualifying stuff, it's these interesting decisions with the hard tyres on and all these things. And I wouldn't say Mercedes are known to play these tricks, but there was, if you guys remember, the Bahrain Grand Prix or the Sakir Grand Prix 2020, that was eventually won by Sergio Perez, that Russell arguably could have won when he subbed in for Hamilton that weekend, and he got this puncture. And there's some, you know, theories over that puncture as to whether it wasn't actually a puncture, and they were just deliberately doing that to Russell so that, you know, to see how he would respond or to not show Hamilton there was going to be a challenge or whatever, I don't know. But there's theories about that Sakir 2020 race that there might be more to it than meets the eye, I think is what I would say on the story. Whether that's true, I don't know. But all I'll say is that Mercedes have kind of been theorised to maybe play some of these trickery games. Whether that's happening, I don't know, but Hamilton thinks it is, it seems. So he says, look, more upgrades coming, it's going to be a close battle. If I get my head on right, I'll get better results. We just kind of admit here that he thinks he's in his own head to some degree, that like if he was mentally, you know, in a better spot, then he'd be qualifying better. But I don't think he's seeing ghosts, or at least he doesn't feel like he's seeing ghosts here. If I'd qualified the way I should have, I would have been competing for the win. And this is what's surprising about the Hamilton-Russell qualifying battle, is that in practice, they're very neck and neck, if not Hamilton has the upper hand a lot of the time. When qualifying comes around, certainly into Q3, all of a sudden Russell seems to have the edge. Maybe that's just, you know, youth and Russell being really good, but for pretty much the majority of Hamilton's career, it would sometimes be the case that he was behind Bottas in practice in Q1 and Q2, and then he'd pull out a mega lap to win in Q3. We haven't really seen that lately, and Hamilton's trying to wonder why. So on the 25th of May after Monaco, he said, why have I not outqualified George enough? Basically, he was asked the question, and he said, yeah, I don't think I'm going to outqualify him all this year. And he was like, well, we'll see. He didn't really want to give any more information away on what he thinks might have been going on at the time. Now, to be fair, on that weekend, he had the old new rear wing specification and Russell had the new one, basically, right? So they had the different specs. So that was the explanation. But this weekend, it was the same story. And Russell was again 2.5, 3 tenths ahead of him in qualifying pace on the final run they did in Q3. And really, 2.5, 3 tenths isn't much in the grand scheme of things of F1. But nowadays, that was the difference between literally 1st and 7th. So it is a big deal. So this is what Hamilton has to say on the situation, and this is remarkable to me. Like, this is a really big story, and it needs to be talked about. Well, the tyres were working throughout the weekends. Then when we got to qualifying, every time I went out of the garage, my tyres were for some reason below on temperature. So this is what he said. In practice, the car felt great. They made no setup changes from practice to qualifying. Of course, he had the fastest lap in the fast part in the last part of practice, FP3. He says, look, we made no changes to the car. I went out in qualifying, and all of a sudden, I didn't have the grip. Every set of tyres that he got was 2 to 3 degrees lower than it should have been. You can't catch up that temperature over your warm-up lap. I couldn't switch the tyres on after that. That's something we really have to look at, because something went on with the blankets, I guess. So what a sentence, right? What a sentence. Hamilton is effectively saying, without saying it, that, well, it looks like some of these Mercedes engineers potentially put my tyres, blankets, shall we say, on a different temperature to what they normally were. Now, what's incredible about this to me is that could the engineers expect Hamilton not to notice this? You know, he's a 7-time world champion. He's the winningest driver in the history of the sport. it says on his dashboard what the tyre temperatures are, and he can also feel the lack of grip in the tyres as well. So I guess there's a couple of explanations. Either there's a malfunctioning tyre blanket at Mercedes, and because usually if you set the tyre blankets to, I don't know, 70 degrees, they will come out at either 69, 70 or 71 degrees. If you set them to 70 and they come out at 67, then that's a serious problem, right? That's a malfunctioning tyre blanket. Like, it should not have those temperature problems, you would well argue. Option 2 is that Hamilton is just seeing things effectively, and this isn't actually happening. His tyres were the same temperature as Russell's were, and there's nothing in it. And maybe Toto Wolff will be compelled in to say something on this story next weekend. And maybe all of a sudden from, the next race onwards, Hamilton's tyres magically are the right temperature during qualifying after he's exposed them. So option 2 is Hamilton seeing things. Option 3 is that there's genuine sabotage here from Mercedes. I just don't really see why Mercedes would be inclined to do this. I know that he's leaving the team, and you maybe want Russell to feel like the proper number one and have a comfortable winning season over Hamilton to really set him up for success in the future. That maybe is the explanation for why they might be doing this, if they even are Mercedes, sabotaging Hamilton so George really feels the confidence that he's just vanquished a 7-time world champion in his final season with the team. He's going to kick on and, be the man they need him to be going forward. I don't know. But it's not even this stuff during the race, because they arguably could have fitted a soft tyre to Hamilton's car at the end of the Grand Prix, certainly a medium, and after the race he says, yeah, I didn't know that George was going to be on the medium. I would have stayed out on the medium if I could have done. The medium was way better than the hard, among so many other things. He just had half a second on me, at least with those tyres at the end of the Grand Prix. So yeah, just another set of strange decisions from Mercedes, and as many are now saying, there's clearly something going on there behind the scenes. Whether Hamilton is, seeing things, whether there's actually something happening, who really knows what the truth is. But an incredible implication for Hamilton to make, and honestly, does it explain, if this is true, the performance delta? Sure, we tend to see in practice Hamilton and Russell are very similar paces. Hamilton has the slight edge. They go into qualifying and, is Hamilton no longer got the ice or whatever? Because it's not like he isn't capable of the lap times that George is doing. We're seeing it throughout the weekends. It's just not happening in the final part of qualifying, and if he's coming out of the pits with his tyres 3 degrees cooler than they should be, then he's trying to do his normal warm-up lap setup, it's going to cost you 0.2, 0.3 of a second, that delta, and that's kind of what we're seeing in qualifying at the moment. So, just the fact that Hamilton's 8-1 down as the driver that he is, feels like there should be more consideration to exactly what might be causing this, and Hamilton has his theories. But it's kind of incredible to imply this about the own team that you've driven for and the team that you've won all those championships with. So if this is true, then wow, that really does open a major can of worms. But I guess time will tell, and we shall see if Mercedes themselves are compelled into responding to this to some degree as time progresses. Just to close out the video, I wanted to look at the championship standings, because this is how things presently look, and I thought this championship was kind of over anyway. I didn't really see a world where Verstappen didn't win the championship regardless, but it is effectively now over, right? Unless there's a Leclerc title charge or a Norris title charge, it might as well be dusted. This is how things look further down the grid, and points in the last 4 rounds. Perez has only scored 22, Hamilton 34, Russell 36, Sainz, Piastri, Leclerc, Norris and Verstappen. So Verstappen still has scored the most points over the last 3 rounds, but in terms of the constructors, Red Bull have scored fewer points than many of their rivals. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.